Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second panel in the Atlantic World Art Fair. I'm Amanda Coulson. I am the founding director at Turn Gallery, and we're here to talk about the collector's role in the development of Caribbean art. Before we begin, I'd like to express huge thanks to Artsy for hosting the Atlantic World Art Fair, and to the 9 galleries and curatorial agencies across the Caribbean for joining us all in this first very exciting endeavor. And I'd like to also thank our lead sponsor, Butterfield. So today we are here to just talk about really the role of the collector, because of course it's extremely important not only to support our artists with galleries and institutions, but to cultivate collectors in order to make sure that we're really supporting young artists. So we're here to hear from 4 collectors from different spaces, different areas in the region, and also internationally. And they're going to introduce themselves and show their collections a little bit. And then if there's time at the end, I'll just ask a few questions. So we're going to get straight to Susanne Fredricks. Susanne Fredricks has been working in the art field in Jamaica for many, many years. As a fellow lady, I'm not going to talk about how many years because that makes us all feel very old. But she had a family. She came up in a family gallery, a framing business, worked for several galleries for over 10 years. The bio was at the beginning. You can find all of our bios also on the Atlantic World Art Fair, so I'm not going to read it and be very boring. But she currently is advising corporate collections and also has her own virtual space called Suzie Wong Presents, which is presenting at the Atlantic World Art Fair. So Kyle, who's our lovely producer behind the scenes, if you could take us to Suzie's presentation, please. And Suzie, if you could step in and introduce yourself to our audience and talk a little bit about your collecting practice, that would be lovely.
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. Lovely to be here with everyone on the panel. So I started Suzie Wong Presents. I mean, I've been a collector for many years. I was very reluctant to call myself one because I didn't have a real direction. But I loved art. Exhibitions, museums has always been a part of my life from I was young. And when you fall in love with work, you fall in love with work. But I started calling myself a collector probably about 8 years ago, when we all know on this panel that we're in a really important moment in the region, and our contemporary artists are really making headway into different spaces and a part of global conversations that are really important. And I get very passionate about that mission. And I think of collecting very much as a regional direction for me. I like quite political work. So I have engaged with artists who are emerging from the region and who I have access to. I would say that Instagram changed the game for me in terms of knowing what was happening where and who was doing what, and being able to experience something of an artist's career, their process, how they think. It was really enriched not just my knowledge to be able to engage, but also my ability to start putting together a collection that I think will really represent this particular moment in time. The presentation's gone. You're on mute, Amanda.
Of course I am. I'm going to come back on. So just keep going, and hopefully the producer will sort that out. And if not, we'll just meet Lusette and we'll see everyone's presentations later. But just carry on telling us about yourself and again about really why you collect and why you think it's so important to cultivate collectors, and not just internationally, because again, all of us rely on international collectors to help us continue, but also on cultivating them at home.
Locally, and I would say increasingly in the diaspora, people that are interested in what's happening, not just here in Jamaica, but in the region, by collecting. Myself, I do believe work needs to be seen. It's very difficult when it's in a private collection. So on my Suzie Wong page, I do put elements of the collection up there. I can't put everything, but there's a good deal up there that I think demystifies the practice of collecting. And I know people that are very reluctant to call themselves that because they don't feel like there's a connoisseurship to their taste or a sense of knowledge.
Or because it sounds sort of hoity-toity, right? To be like, I'm a collector. Like I think people
it carries a certain kind of status that people don't feel comfortable really stepping into. And I didn't either until, quite recently, when I really feel that I'm doing something purposeful and with direction and with a purpose. I've found collecting art has been huge in my family life, with my son, with his friends, how we talk about issues, how we talk about history, how we talk about materials and get their opinions on things. So I do think that has been hugely enriching, certainly in my personal life, not just me enjoying the work, but having my son and his kind of a younger generation really kind of get excited about new things. Right, here we have just a screenshot from the website with a few works that are in my collection. I really started my first foray into the US space in terms of purchasing work from the region with Furley Baez. I saw her solo show at PAM. I was completely in love with the work. And so I started to engage with her gallery and to see what works were available. And it was my first big step into a high price range as well, because it's not like I have, a big budget. So I've been very astute with how I engage with which artists, but I really am very conscious of trying to build, the various narratives in a holistic way. So someone in the future could look at this collection and say, well, these were the things that were in the minds of the artists and in the processes of artistic production in the region. Okay, we're moved on. I worked recently. This is another collection. So enough about my private one. This was a corporate collection that I consulted on. It was for the AC Marriott Kingston. And it was really a wonderful project. They had a good budget. The AC brand is a very kind of urban, contemporary, youthful brand. And they really wanted to bring Jamaica into the space. Because it is a global brand, it can feel quite generic. So they really wanted the visuals to be able to make this AC distinct and have people remember it.
I really love, Suze, that I want to give you kudos for that you made this map, which is available to everybody in the hotel, because it actually points out like local art spaces too, which is so great because so many of our, we're all in the region, we're all dealing with tourism. And I think it's so great that you tried to kind of, again, point people in the right direction, because so often they come to our countries and they just want to go to the beach. So it's really wonderful that you kind of city map and you like gave people, the art in the hotel, but then also like, hey, go to these spaces too. So I think that's brilliant.
Right, and the hotel team are very interested in art programming. So we had this huge plan for art programming, which intersected with other creative endeavors, like we were going to be doing the writers' talks there, etc. But then COVID hit, so hopefully that will pick up. And in terms of the map, it really was about platforming what was happening here and creating a whole experience for people. And there was even an art tour that was being discussed at the time for people that were interested that came to the hotel. This image here is Cosmo White in the background, shot at 2, which is the anchor for the whole collection as you walk into the space. This is at the entrance. And Laura Facey's sculptural work, Black Petals, which is a huge cedar root, which is so stunning, I can't tell you. And it calls to be touched. So we placed this, and we were very thoughtful about the work itself. I want to tell a bit of a story. Carl, if you could go back, please. I just want to tell a story that was a really powerful moment. And as collectors and art lovers, I think everyone will appreciate it. Shot at 2, as we know, is a very, it's all about the tensions of Jamaican masculinity. It's a really powerful work, but it's an iconic image that thousands, if not millions of people recognize from film culture. When we were installing it, I had this anxiety about it fitting, and we had all these plans. And so while the install was going on in the space of the lighting, and there were men on ladders everywhere, it was noisy, we pulled it out just to make sure that it could fit and everything was going to be cool with the install. And we decided to take the wrapping off, and we were deep in conversation, really happy with how it looked and everything. And then we realized the room was completely quiet. And all the guys who were working, and there were women working as well, everyone had stopped to look at this image. And they couldn't really understand, like, what was this doing in here, which was the point of the work when we commissioned it with Cosmo. It was a conversation about contesting this kind of space, as access, who gets to come into this kind of space and be there. And it was really a very moving moment. And they all came off the ladders, and we had long conversations about what the work meant. And then I called Cosmo straight after, all excited that the impact that it had. And it's the most Instagrammed kind of image in the space to date.
Well, The Harder They Come was such a classic movie, right? And I think so many of us like grew up with it, and it was such a kind of cultural moment. Yeah,
exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah. We also included, I mean, the good thing about working with this collection was they were very open. They were quite surprised at the nature of the contemporary work locally. We do have Riddell Warner, can't really see it in this image, but he's on a huge TV monitor we have digital work, sculpture, painting, mixed media. We have a beautiful, like, large piece from Andre Woolery, which is a big sound system push pin piece as well.
Yeah, maybe we could go through some more slides and just see some of the other shots from the collection, please.
Yeah, here we have David Pinto. You see he does a lot of like really beautiful organic shapes and forms around fertility and seed pods, and that's the dark one in the distance. And Jag Mehta, who's an Indian Jamaican national who is a self-taught ceramicist, and the work is really kind of essential and really stunning, and the points are littered around the whole lobby area. They are meant to be kind of disruptive in their impact. Carl, can you go to the next one, please? I mean, the AC were very visionary and very open, and so we also commissioned this piece by Laura Facey called Tines. It's part of her Radiant Comb series. And it's all about, I mean, if we could, close up, you'll see there's scarring all down the center. I mean, her work is so beautifully done. And it's all about the untangling of histories. All of the work in the collection really give a whole different political sense of Jamaican history, nationhood, different ideas about economy and power and social space and gender. And so when you're in there, the people that really love art have access to a whole catalog where you can read about the artist and the ideas in the work.
Yeah, and I think also what's important is you're giving visitors, like even people that don't necessarily love art or don't think they love art yet, they're given the opportunity, because I think a lot of people are scared about the idea of living with art, or what does it mean, like you said, to be a collector. And I think it's great to have a space like this that just shows, you can live with it, it can be there. And that even people who don't know yet that they're interested in art. So I think a lot of people think, oh, art, that's scary, that's for the initiated, but it's not. And I think the more opportunities you can have to just have people interact, they'll be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And they'll come to Jamaica and be like, hey, maybe I'll go to a gallery, maybe I'll go to a museum, as opposed to just going to the beach. So I think it's really fantastic that you did this. We should probably move on to Lusette soon. So just why don't you finish up your slides and let us know. This is Shoshana Weinberger, right?
Yeah, Shoshana Weinberger. This is Market Fruits, and this is all about the place of women in market economies in Jamaica and the kind of containment there, as well as the liberation. And Katrina Coombs in the background is a textile work. And it's really beautiful, and it's all about the centering, the overwhelm, and holding an anchor in the midst of the chaos of life, kind of thing. So it was a really visionary collection, and there's really good programming planned around it. And I'm hoping they'll really, once the pandemic's over and things start to regenerate, then we'll be able to get back on that program. But it's been a really important collection because it's public. Anyone can go into the AC. You don't have to be staying there. They have a very busy nightlife, bar, restaurant, and they're planning to add to the collection as well, and hopefully rotate so that it's the beginning. And I think it's important because they recognize the value of contemporary work.
Thank you so much, Suzie. And we're going to now hear a little bit from Lusette Verboom. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Verboom. You got to take your mic off. Remember, take your mic off. I'm the worst at that. I want to invent a new icon, like a monkey, don't talk like see here, but like this, because we're always forgetting our mics. So Lusette, welcome to our little panel. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the audience who you are.
Hi, Amanda, and thank you for having me in this panel. I mean, I'm very impressed with the presentation of Suzie. And actually, especially because in Curacao, um, actually the history of art is not so, it's young. When I started the gallery almost 25 years or more than 25 years ago, it was like the local art was not in the picture. There were only, I mean, you could tell on the finger the local artists that were really being noticed by the happy few that purchased art. So most of the art were actually the exhibitions that were being held were from artists coming from abroad. So when I started the gallery, I mean, it was for me because I come from a background that art is not really uh, purchased. I mean, if you have something hanging on a wall, we call it a picture. You see, so it was really for
Yeah,
me
yeah.
when I got into this art scenery because my husband is a fine art teacher. I was like, where is our local art? Where are our local artists? So that's what I wanted to present, that in Curacao, there are local artists that are working on quite a good level of presentation of their artwork. And but it was, I think it was for me then, if I look back, it was difficult because whenever you think about or you talk about, okay, I have a local art gallery, then they say, oh, local art, that is, that it's like the same as a craft, let's say. I see that we got now to the first presentation. That's one of the artists that I really, really cherish very much. That's Jose Maria Capricorn. This is for my own collection. The sculpture underneath is also his. He is 89 and he's still working. I mean, he has a fabulous collection of work. I mean, and he was one of the artists that was in picture when I got into the art business. And he was one of the people who supported me. And this piece I bought from him, it was in 2017 when my mother died, because it represented for me, this piece represents my mother. It's called Women with Ornaments, and that's my mother. I mean, she has always with her birds, with her flowers. But even in the morning when she wakes up, she dresses herself. She puts a lot of rings on her fingers, braces on her arm. She is always with a lot of chains on her neck. I mean, even when in the last days she was like that. So I don't have a picture of my mother in my house, but I have this representing my mother. So I'm very happy with this piece. And
Beautiful. I love that you start
Yes.
with a piece that's very personal to you, because I think that's how many of us get into collecting,
Yes.
right? We start very often with a personal piece or a piece that speaks to us. And I think, we don't, like you said, when we buy our first piece, we don't think of ourselves as collectors at all. And then, it's almost like a gateway hug, that first piece. Can we have the next slide, please?
Yes. Actually, this was not really my first piece that I bought, but the first piece that I bought was his. It was back in 2006 or something like that. But I mean, I never talked and called myself a collector. I was stimulating artists to present their work. And most of the time, I was like, okay, if I have an exhibition, I buy a piece of the work just to stimulate the artist to, because when I decide to organize an exhibition of the artist, I have been stimulating him or her to work for 2 or 3 years before I decide, okay, now you are ready for an exhibition. So for sure, I buy a piece of him, of her. And now I realize that most of the pieces that I buy are one way or the other. It's the human figure that comes back into the piece. And actually, in Curacao, what I now realize is that people, I mean, we have wonderful collections on the island, really wonderful. But people, they don't feel like they collect, or it's not like they love their artwork, but when they become elderly or they pass away or whatever, the family, they don't understand that this is a collection that you should keep. They want, if they don't like the piece, they will get rid of it or they give it away or those kind of stuff. And lately I'm really into start to let people know that collection collecting is very, very important for documentation of your art history, for documentation of your artist. Did you see the growth of your artist? Did you see what they're into in several phases of their lives? So this is a Cuban artist. He's called Angel Luis de la Rosa. He came to Curacao on a mission, and he never went back. I mean, he still has very good with his family. He's very good with his family, but he never. I think he lives here now for 11 years or something. And I have had now like 3 exhibitions of his work. And this is of his second exhibition. This work I bought. I mean, I love the piece.
It's
really.
beautiful. It's an amazing piece. But I love what you said about having people. I think that's important as collectors also to educate in that sense of, like you spoke about, having people understand that they've created a collection and to think about what to do with that in terms of legacy. And that's a question I was going to ask you, and you had a point to present. So I'll come back around to it. But thinking about, where you're going to leave it or how you're going to preserve it. Because those are really important considerations. I've seen that in the Bahamas too, that someone passes away and then the kids are like, oh, I just want them, I'm just going to, and you don't know where things go. You don't know where things end up, or they sell things, they leave the country, or they end up in a dumpster. I mean, I hate to say it, but if you haven't educated like your family that this is something important to you, you don't know what's going to happen to the work. So
and one of the other problems with this is also that, like, anyway, I call them collectors. I mean, but these people, they really, really love art, and they buy most of the time. I have an exhibition, they come and they buy, and art without an exhibition. If they love a piece, they just buy it. But then their houses are getting crowded now. And what do you see? You see that the children, I mean, they want other kind of art. They don't like the traditional kind of art that their parents used to love. Houses are now very spacious, a lot of glass, no walls, and they just want one contemporary piece most of the time, and that's it. So and we don't have really a museum of modern art. So, I mean, it's very hard to think about what to do. I see this picture coming up now. This is painting. This is also a dear friend of mine that passed away. His name is Alice Juliana. And this was a present for him, from him to me. And actually, every time I feel down, I look at this, because, I mean, it gives me power. It gives me, you go, girl. That's actually... That's when he gave it to me. That's that's what he told me also. You go, girl, and that's why I have it near me. I have a lot of his work in my collection. Actually, I wrote also a small book about him, about his paintings, because he has a lot of work. He's one of the most valued people that do document our history, our oral history, our music. So many things. So, I mean, for me, having this work from him, I mean, this is just very wonderful. And I have like 6 or 7 works of him in my collection, but it's also part of a lot of people's collection. When I was doing the book, I mean, it was so great because so many stories came up, about purchasing the work. This is a large work of him. Most of the time he does very small miniatures, but very political, very, he puts always the woman in front. One of the things I always remember of him, that he says, when you do in name of the Father, the Mother, the Holy, and thing, then he says, okay, the Father, the Mother, no, he says the Father, the Holy Spirit, Amen. And he says, oh, where did the mother go? Is always thinking about the mother, the women, what he works with. This is another work that is from Angwin Hodge. I love primitive work. I mean, the joy that it gives, the way it's presented. This is he lives in the countryside, and this is what happens in the countryside. So it's I love his work. I have been stimulating him for a long time to do an exhibition before he did the exhibition of his work. And that's one of the things that most of the time people come to me and say, oh, I want the exhibition. And I always like, okay, are you ready for an exhibition? What kind of work do you do? Do you have a collection for an exhibition? I try to educate the artists because I work a lot of time with upcoming artists or artists who never have had an exhibition, and that they think about their work, that it's not because they work and they pile up work, 30, 40 works or 25, whatever, and then they come to me and say, okay, I'm ready for an exhibition, because they don't have the idea of how to look at their own work and see what is valuable, or what they have to really work with, or before it's ready. This was one of an exhibition that I had. It was a group exhibition, and this is a patchwork. This is a cloth, and that's why I
Yeah,
really, really
textile.
love
Yeah,
this.
I love it. It's very
Yes,
beautiful.
it's very beautiful work, and it's a large piece. And I like the expressions of the work. I didn't purchase this work, but I wanted to bring it up because I really, really love the textile and the patchwork and the way it's done and it's created. So that's why I bring it up. This artist, this is Alan Ailings. He does a lot of ceramic. He does ceramic. She worked in ceramics, and her work is, in my opinion, very powerful. She always brings the texture. Her work is very textural. It's very it's one way. It's a figurative, but it's also conceptualist. So that's why I love to see her work. I have a couple of works of her in my collection. But the point with ceramics, it takes it's costly. It's more costly than paintings most of the time. And
Yeah,
people,
and actually even shipping the clay. I don't know how it is in Curacao, but for us to actually bring the clay down here is more expensive than to bring the finished object, which is, completely crazy. But that's some of the things that we have to deal with, in the regions.
Yeah. I just want to say that, this is Richard Deus. I love his work also because it's very, very powerful. And I just want to point out that when I've had an exhibition of him, there were only portraits and they didn't sell. Because at that time, portraits were not in the picture, let's say. And then a couple of years, like last year, I held another exhibition of him. And I mean, we were lacking some words. So I said, okay, just bring up the other works that you didn't sell in the other exhibition. And then all of the work that didn't sell that time sold now. And it's just because Black Lives Matters. You see that some work is in the period, what kind of period you are in, how you present the work, and how if at that time the work is, what the people, it's politically correct to buy work or not to buy work. That's actually what I experienced doing this kind of work. But I have to, what I want to bring with my gallery is that the local art, if I see in this 25 years, it really, really, really took a spurt. When I started, local art was like craft, and as you see the production of work now, what people bring up, it's really, really high end and very, very good, and a lot of people working now, and local artists really, at this moment, people appreciate it, and it was back then not.
Yeah, it's true. Thank you so much, Lusette. No, it's interesting what you said, that I think it's same here regionally. I think 10 years ago, even here, people didn't want to live with actually people's faces very often looking at them, but there has been like suddenly a change in that in that kind of concept. And now you see portraits and people like, say, Jordan Castile or Amy Sherald, and really taking off in such a way that it sort of seems to be making it more normalized. So thank you so much. We're going to go to Derek Rolle now. So he's got to come off mute, don't forget, and we're going to put up his presentation. Derek Rolle is from my home country, the Bahamas. So always bigging up my people. Derek's been at the central bank for 30 years as a banker. But he's also very involved in the development of the collection. He works very closely with the curator there. They recently just hired a full-time here, so it'd be really interesting to hear, Derek, your thoughts about that. That was one of my questions, like how important is it to kind of really care for the collection? And he also has a personal collection, and he's very well known in the Bahamas for supporting young artists, emerging artists, but also mid-career artists. So that's Derek Rolle. So let's just maybe go to the first slide. Derek, you take it over from here.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I hope you can hear me okay. So I'm going to probably give another perspective, right? I mean, because what we're looking at here is the central bank as a corporate collector. And then I'll probably talk a little bit about my personal collection, but focus mostly on the central bank as you know, as a corporate collector. But the central bank has always collected. I mean, we have looked at art as a part of our collection from my inception. I mean, all the governors have always been interested in art, and at some level, they've also been collectors in their own right. So the bank has also approached art in terms of supporting the arts and the artists. Also, in terms of engaging with the community in very many tangible ways. So, you know, the bank's art program really began to take shape in 1984 when the then Governor William Allen introduced the central bank's annual art competition. And, you know, it was at this time that the bank also decided that it needed to install its first curator, and that was Antonius Roberts. And Antonius had been with us for many, many years since then. But, you know, during that time, the bank really started to focus its strategy on acquisitions through those competitions, mostly through the competitions, but in some cases as well, maybe purchasing pieces directly from the artist. But you know, Antonius was with us for quite some time, as you know, Amanda. But other curators also after that really contributed to the works. You're talking about people like Heino Schmid and Monique Kroll,
Yeah.
and Angelica Watts-Whitfield. They all contributed in their own way. So, but now in 2017, when I became the deputy governor, the collection fell squarely into my remit. So it was during this time that I started really to look at the strategy and look at how we had collected over the years and what we have missed and what have we done well, what we have not done well. And one of the things that I was fortunate to have was the fact that my governor at the time, who was still with us, John Rolle, he also has a keen eye for and a huge interest in Bahamian art. So, you know, one of the things we decided to do was, okay, well, let's take this opportunity to start looking at where we could fill some of the gaps that we've missed over the years. And one of the things that we did was, and you'll see in the slides later on, we purchased some of our pieces that were really missing. Lynn Perotti, for example, we had nothing from Lynn Perotti. We had nothing from the likes of Kendall Hanna. And so we started to bring some of those things into the collection. So what you're looking at here on the screen is, I mean, this is Adrian Simmons. This is, you know, I try not to get too attached to the corporate pieces because they are corporate pieces, but this is one of my favorite pieces in our collection. I think when Ulrich, who is our current curator, joined us, he probably wondered why I fussed about this piece so much, because I wanted it to go somewhere where it would be protected, but it would be very easily seen by the staff on a daily basis. This All Erosion by Edwin Simonet. And I know Edwin's view on this piece was really looking at how everything is temporary, how, you know, we as people are temporary, and of course we as our nation is temporary. We live in a coastal area, and just the level of erosion that happens through natural sources is substantial. For me, this piece means even more than that, because this represents for me an emotional journey that a person sometimes takes, and how, you know, that emotional journey can erode parts of you. And just looking at the void between the torso and the legs was always powerful to me. So this was one of those things that I was really happy we were able to get into our collection. So we can move on to the next slide. So one of the most important things I think we've acquired since Ulrich has joined us is this an amazing series by Jeffrey Merritz. This is a very recent acquisition to the corporate collection, but it's one of the fantastic things that we've purchased, and I think really will add a significant amount of depth to a collection that previously we didn't have anything substantial from this amazing up and coming Bahamian artist. So,
but you do have, and I think that's interesting for people. I don't know if people heard that you buy very often young. And what I think is great is that you're now coming in and continuing to support, because Jeffrey, I believe, I don't know if he was in the high school show. You have a very important high school show,
yes.
which really encourages Bahamians. There's a prize, there's a scholarship, and then you have the open category. And I believe he won that one year. So it's nice for your collection has a trajectory as well, which is a really nice part of your collection.
Right. Yeah. And so this was one of the things I was talking about earlier, where, we might have had pieces from an artist that were, it was very early on in his or her career, sort of may have lost touch with the person for whatever reason, but now need to come back and look at where that person has moved. Some of the other artists in our collection, we've had the benefit of keeping track of for the entire, from their high school days all the way through their substantial careers in art, and some others, were not so substantially tracked. So we can move to the next slide. This again is another fantastic piece that I have a little bit of an emotional attachment to. An amazing piece by Heino Schmid. I actually I think worked with Ulrich to make sure I had this one in my office, because this one really spoke to me when I first saw it. It's one of those things that, you look at this, and the thing that this made me feel was, wow, you have someone who is on your back, but you're carrying this person on your back, and how that person on your back becomes the more defined image of the two, and how powerful that must be in a real world situation. And we all go through that. We all go through these scenarios where, someone's always more important than you, and that person takes away from who you are and how you take care of yourself. But eventually we realize we have to come back and make ourselves important too. So, and
Heino, as you mentioned, was actually one of the curators at Central Bank.
Yes.
So the Central Bank did, like you said, they had curators always, but they weren't always full-time and curated shows. And Heino was one of those, and he did a wonderful job. And it's so great to see his work in your collection.
Yeah, thanks. So we can go to the next slide now. So here it's Susanne Williams, another fantastic Bahamian artist. We're just now getting into, accumulating work from this fantastic artist. And this is all thanks to some of the work we've been doing on our strategy lately to try to make sure we accumulate some of the pieces that we've been missing over time. Now, I'll talk a little bit about my personal journey for a minute here, while we have some time. Like some of my colleagues said earlier, I didn't really consider myself a collector early on. I would go to the Central Bank shows. I would go to the shows at the University of the Bahamas and the College of the Bahamas, and I would pick up pieces. I would like pieces. I would take them home with me, but I never really considered myself a collector, because there is this air that you must be a certain type of person if you're collecting art. But it wasn't until a good friend of mine and another Bahamian collector, Dr. Vaughn Conliffe, invited me to a show at Pop-Up Studios. I think it was 2007 or maybe 2008, and Lynn Perotti, another Bahamian artist, unveiled her inaugural series at that show, and I bought my first substantial piece that night. And that was the night that I knew I was in trouble, because I have been in love with art ever since. And that, to me, is a part of what makes collecting interesting, is being able to develop the relationships with the artists themselves. I mean, some years I purchased pieces from only one artist. Some years I purchased pieces from multiple people, but it's always about the relationship that you build with them, and that's what makes this art collecting really a phenomenal part of my life. So I would think we can move to the next.
Yeah, and I just would like to say Sue Bennett-Williams, who's an amazing, she also was a teacher, and she taught many of the younger generation of artists. She was a teacher at University of the Bahamas for many years. She was also a ceramicist. And so she really was also impactful on the scene for that reason.
Yes, indeed. So it's a fantastic piece by Tessa Whitehead. Again, another piece that I find very powerful. It's a very dark piece. It has its very specific meanings, I'm sure, but it's a piece that we are so fantastically happy to have in our collection. And again, I think this was the first piece we were able to acquire from Tessa some years ago. We do have a few more pieces in the collection now. We can go to the next slide. So this amazing piece by Stan Burnside is something we recently was able to acquire into our collection, and we didn't have a piece from this artist prior. Very important artist, as any Bahamian knows, maybe even everyone in the region knows. But this piece, Ashanti Town, that we acquired, I think last year, was really something that we are fascinated and just dumbfounded to finally have in our collection.
Yeah, another such important. I think the next slide shows it installed in the space.
Yes, it's installed.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. So you get a sense of the scale. It's really a massive painting, and Stan was again so important in the development of Bahamian art.
Yes, yeah,
it's a beautiful piece.
Thanks. We can go to the next slide, and I think this is So this was one of the first pieces that the present governor, and I purchased under our new strategy to try to get pieces from artists that we'd somewhat neglected over the years, not intentionally, but just inadvertently. So this piece by Lynn Perot, we are fascinated to have this in our collection. And we like Lynn's pieces. One of the things that I think out of all of the pieces, the major pieces in our collection, this is one that gets a lot of high praises from the staff and visitors. It's a very happy, very sort of Bahamian piece, and people like this a lot, and I like it too. I think it's fun. It's just
and
fantastic.
I think the next slide's a close up. Yeah, Lynn's very easy to love because she's such a great painter and so beautiful. But I think what's really interesting is that she actually has a current show on right now at the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas. That her work is always about something to do with the erosion of landscape, with I don't know, it's the salt industry, the heating seas. She always has very often an environmental message, or a message about how, we're kind of damaging the country. So it's sort of, I like the way it lures you in because it looks kind of pretty on the surface, but then when you start to look at it more, you start to see there's like literally these undercurrents.
Yeah,
so,
indeed. Amanda, that piece there from the Inagua series, that's the large scale piece, but the smaller version of that was actually the first piece that I ever bought for my personal collection back in 2008. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Derek. So now we're over to Kenneth, and I just want to let Kyle know, who's our lovely producer behind the scenes. You just have to scroll through Kenneth's pictures, like really every few. Just bring up the title card. The first one, let him introduce himself, and then we're just gonna like really scroll through because he's got a lot of pictures. Kenneth is I don't know how many years you've been collecting, but a long time, but also has Wedge curatorial projects. And you're gonna see that in the slideshow too, that not only does Ken live with his art, but he has been promoting artists, and he had it in his practice where he works, and then that turned into a gallery, and now he's done museum shows, and his collection is been really instrumental in bringing a lot of artists known up to Canada, where he's located. So Ken, take it away.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks so much for having me join today. I'm here in Toronto. I was born in Canada. My parents are from Jamaica and came in the 60s. So, they actually arrived in the 50s. I was born in the 60s. So they're early immigrants from Jamaica to Canada, much, way ahead of the wave that came in the 70s. So, we were kind of like an island in the little town that I grew up in Windsor, which is across from Detroit, Michigan. So I had a bit of a tricultural upbringing. It was kind of, Caribbean around the house with the music, the food, the vibe, the culture, but then, very Canadian, with my schooling, but very American in terms of my media, all the TV shows and all the movies that I saw. and a lot of the art that I saw. So one of the images that really spoke to me was James Van Der Zee's couple in raccoon coats, this super elegant couple, that impossibly sophisticated in their, inside of their Harlem brownstone with this Cadillac with white wall tires. And I saw that as a 10-year-old at the Detroit Institute of Arts. And a lot of people I know, including Deborah Willis and Dawood Bey and others, that this is the work that really kind of like set them on the path. I actually, many years later, 20 years later, when I was a practicing dentist in Toronto, I started showing work in my home. So this is the Wedge shaped space, the Wedge Gallery. And the first show was James Van Der Zee. I managed to get that work and brought it up to Toronto for the first time. We can keep rolling. Just some other installation shots in the beautiful wedge-shaped loft that I lived in back then. So I've been collecting for about 25 years. This loft, by the way, was designed by Deltaire Long, a Jamaican-born interior designer in Toronto and graphic designer. I always work with young, emerging Black, or actually Caribbean architects. So these are just some images from my nonprofit Wedge curatorial project. So there's been sort of two streams in my life. A collector, privately owned Wedge Collection, and then this kind of vehicle platform for emerging Black artists globally. And actually, it's wider than that. It's more inclusive. It's for artists that are thinking about Black identity, globally. And it was actually Thelma Golden from the Studio Museum, who's become a friend, who said, hey, you've been taking the global and making it, local in Toronto. Why don't you take local and make it global? Start telling stories, abroad about your unique Black Canadian experience. And that sort of set me on a path as well. So we can keep rolling. This is one of the first shows that I did out of my own collection at the Museum of Contemporary Canadian Art. And it was really, a matter of thinking about how to kind of reorganize your works, which already were collected in a sense of storytelling. It was sort of one work building on another. You can see some works in a show that was at the Nasher Museum in North Carolina. It was my friend Trevor Schoonmaker. And this was a big show, maybe 80, 90 works from my collection about a decade ago. So
was
already,
this the Becoming show?
That was the Becoming show.
Yeah.
And then always moving forward, a smaller show with some works from the African continent, some kind of emerging practices from the region. I was a juror at the Bamako encounters in Bamako, Mali, an event that I've attended many times over the years. And after I took off my juror hat, I later met up with and called many of the artists and their representatives and bought a lot of work. So it sort of broadened the collection. Travel is such an important thing as a collector. You have to go to the spots. You have to do the studio visits. So this is, what I was talking about with Thelma, this thing that was already burning in my heart. I want to show these Black Canadian artists. And she was the one that kind of gave me the kick in the butt to, you can do that, Ken. Like, people would be interested in this. And so Dawit Petros is Eritrean born, but grew up in Western Canada and on the prairies, and then went to art school in the French-speaking part of Canada in Montreal, and then did a master's in Boston. So he's had all kinds of interesting sort of experiences in terms of the migration story, and that comes out in his work. This work's a very iconic one in my collection, and it's thinking about the Black Canadian experience. We did a show around works that spoke about that experience through contemporary photography in my collection at the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum, which is one of our great galleries in Canada. I did it as an intervention right into the Canadiana galleries where we, had our European forefathers on these big oil paintings, and we did it as a kind of a intervention. The show traveled to Halifax to our Museum of Immigration, that then traveled to my hometown of Windsor, which was a thrill for me. This is an installation shot from that show. And the show grew as my collecting of Black Canadian artists grew. And so we can keep rolling. You can see an installation shot that has Dawit Petros sign that iconic work in it. And keep rolling. So I'll just show some images that I'm very proud of as a collector. I also collect young. I don't have the budget as a dentist, like a corporation or a billionaire collector. So I have to be very thoughtful and strategic in my collecting. Sometimes you see something and you just have to have it. And that was the case with Lynette Yetamboachi, who's become a good friend. But I bought her work early on when it was affordable and when it was available. And, this particular work has been on display in my living room, and now it's on tour with the Tate Britain show, the Artist Mid-Career Survey.
Yeah, Lynette's done amazingly, as has Henry Taylor.
Yeah,
Great pieces.
Yeah, I actually bought this Henry Taylor piece at the NADA show at Art Basel Miami in maybe 2009. For like less than $1,000 US.
Yeah, and that's good you're talking about that, because again, I do think some people feel like they can't get into collecting because it's a rich person's game. We had Lynette at Volta, we had Henry Taylor at Volta like in 2005. And if you go to those satellite fairs, that's where you can find some of these artists before they become multi-million dollar.
So never discriminate on your fairs, especially an inaugural fair like this. This is where you find the work that really builds your collection. It's foundational. You need to be able to to afford work as a collector. And so there's no use blowing your entire annual budget on one work. My philosophy has always been buy, 10 works over the year, one work a month if you can, that's in that, $500 to $1,000 range. And it might have moved up to maybe $5,000 to $10,000 now for me. But hey, back then it's what I could afford. And then it really forces you to make, I think, considered choices. You really have to think carefully about building one thing onto another and giving your collection a focus. In my case, there's a lot of portraiture and figuration. So Jonathan Lyndon Chase, who's doing very well now, Philadelphia artist, thinking about queerness and Black masculinity, great artist. We can keep rolling through these. Next, and the very iconic photograph from Malik Sidibe that I was lucky enough to purchase many years ago. He became a good friend. He died recently, but I visited him probably 3 times in his studio in Bamako, saw him for lunch in New York, met him at the Venice Biennale when he got the Golden Lion, and just really got to see the rise of someone who had been doing great work and had been revered in its own city over many years. So it was a thrill. He's one of the first senior artists, that I met who had really come into the world in later years, but it had a lifetime of work behind him. Van Lee Burke, another very iconic image of this Jamaican British boy born in England of Jamaican parentage, just like myself, born in Canada of Jamaican parentage. So there's a second generation thing that speaks to me. And, I used to wave a Canadian flag riding my banana seat bike when I was a kid. And so there's some reflection in a lot of what I purchase. There's a kind of a thrill at seeing this kid doing something that, is obviously very risky in the time that he's doing that with, white nationalists everywhere. And, he's in this park in Handsworth Park in Birmingham saying, I'm here, look at me, I'm British, I really speaks to me. And so we can keep rolling. Yeah, and I'll show some works from Caribbean artists in the collection. I was lucky enough to acquire this work from Ebony Patterson from Monique Meloche Gallery. Monique Meloche and I grew up together in Windsor. She then has become a big Chicago and New York dealer.
Wow, I didn't know that. That just blew my mind.
Yeah, we're the same generation, different high schools, but we,
And
one day we're going to get out of this little town.
Yeah, and you did. And she's been representing artists of color and Caribbean artists for a long while. She has she's not a dealer who's riding the current hip wave. She's been in it from the get-go.
Oh yeah, Rashid Johnson, many people that she's been championing for many years. So we all know Ebony's work, and I don't have to elaborate. But thrilled to have her work in the collection. And Radcliffe Roy from Jamaica, another artist who I think he's become this big Instagram star. He does this very socially conscious work. This is this incredible series called Nigga Beach. It's sort of like a beach that I know well in Montego Bay in Jamaica, that Jamaican nationals have a beach of their own. This is not the beach that the tourists go to. This is the beach that you can just hang out in your brassiere and play your music and have a fish fry. And this is, you know, a beach for us. And so he did this great series of, you know, the beauty of ordinary Black life. And I have these works. I have 5 of them. I have them up in my loft apartment in Toronto, and I want my 6-year-old and my 4-year-old son to sort of appreciate this sort of, you know, beauty of people that kind of do their own thing, and, you know, rather than the kind of more stereotypical kind of tourist image.
And claim space, right? I mean, it's really important. Like, I think a lot of people that aren't from the Caribbean don't understand how much our beaches are co-opted by by people that aren't from here, and that it's not easy for us. Even if you look like me, it's not easy for us to go on the beach.
No trespassing.
You get chased off, and you have to claim these spaces, and like, it's important to like claim those spaces. Sheena Rose,
Sheena, who I just love, and I think many of you know, she's an artist who, you know, just had to be herself, and she is, you know, this great series is really based on comments that men made to her on the street, you know, because of her great fashion sense. They're like, you know, this girl is a clown or what, you know, cheese on your face, girl, your boobies is hanging out, you know, like, it's just like they're one after another that are really funny. I bought this one, and you know, I put it up in my dental office, and gets a lot of attention. And I've got another one at my office that, you know, girl, you know, your teeth so, you know, you're so pretty, you make my teeth rot, you know, like real funny little phrases that you know, these it's a comment on, you know, the culture and that interplay between, you know, men and women. She's really great. And that's a painting on wood.
Keep it rolling. There we go. Yeah.
So
awesome.
Richard Rollins is someone who I met through, you know, working with him on a show with contemporary Caribbean photographers that we brought up from Trinidad to Toronto. And he's gone back to school as a mature artist and done his master's. And then it was a thrill to me to see that this image became very iconic with Zach Ove's show that he curated.
Get Up, Stand Up.
Get Up, Stand Up. Yeah, it was sort of the signature image. Yeah. And it really, of course, speaks to my whole thing around this colonial thing, this love-hate with Britain, the mother country, you know, sort of like we all grew up with it, you know, and my Jamaican parents that would stand there for God Save the Queen. But
and
at the same time,
And actually, Jeffrey Maris, the artist that Derek Roll showed with that beautiful, triptych, the piece he won the Central Bank Prize with was called This Wee Tea Party. And he'd asked Bahamians to give him a teacup, because we we everyone grew up. Grew up with a case in their house with like tea.
And he
That's
the good stuff.
So that teacup is just so,
Yeah, it's iconic. Yeah. So these are some Caribbean Canadian artists. Sandra Brewster, who's Guyanese, and does this great work with these kind of iconic images called the Smiths that you see in the background, which the faces are really torn out of the white pages of a phone book, and it's the last name Smith. So it's like the Black every person. Very clever. Yeah, she's doing great work. Keep rolling. Next slide. Yeah, and Christina Leslie. This work was in that seminal show Rockstone and Boot Heel. I think, that Christina Newman, had done that great show.
Important. That was, really important. And that's going to be one
right
of the shows
in Connecticut.
Really Caribbean art.
Yeah. So I lent this work, Canadian artist. And Julian Charlton, we just did a project with her with the Wedge Curatorial Project. Pretty great new artist that's part of this, new Black vanguard, as Antoine Sargent would say. These are young artists that are kind of doing this fearless kind of imagery with fashion. And keep rolling.
Just keep going. Yeah, there we go. Oh, and
this might be the last slide. Yeah, this is just sort of how I live with art. So I'm in a very contemporary loft that was designed by David Peterson, who's also Guyanese. And, the works sort of change all the time. You can see all the photography in that hallway. This is our hallway to our bedrooms. I've got a collection of salt and pepper shakers. I think when you're a collector, you collect things, and that's been over many years. And so I just want to give you a sense of, that I'm not bound by any kind of traditions. I think I live in a very contemporary way, but the art changes all the time. It changes with my mood, and the dental clinic is a great place. I work as a dentist. I own a clinic in downtown Toronto. We just change up the art every time, which is a very fun thing for the patients coming for their cleaning every 6 months. And it's Jamel Shabazz right now, and images of kids on the subway in New York in the 80s. And, the next thing might be, I think we had Albert Artwell, an intuitive painter from Jamaica, those works in the office. And so it's a chance for me to sort of live with my art. And finally, I'll mention that the Aperture Foundation will be publishing a book of photography from my collection this fall. And that's a great opportunity to mix in some of the, Canadian artists who I love, the Caribbean artists who I love. So look for that. And there'll be more about that as time goes on. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. That's just amazing. So I just want to thank you all. I know we're supposed to, the presentation was an hour, but we're going to stay on. We're going to have a little bit of a chat. And then if anyone has questions from the audience, please write them in. There is somebody taking care of any questions coming in. If you have a particular question for any of the presenters, please write that in the chat. I have a couple of questions. I'm not going to keep you long, but it was just so great. I mean, some of them I raised while we were talking. And since Ken, you went last, I'm going to ask you first. Do you think about legacy when you're collecting? And that's for all of you. Derek, you've got a personal collection. You didn't speak to it, but you all have personal collections. Are you already thinking about, as collectors, what you're going to do with that, or the importance of it? Would you want it to go to an educating space? And obviously, I don't want to commit anybody to anything on live chat. But are you thinking about that already? Have you all thought about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll be brief. I'll just say that I didn't think about it when I was putting it together. I never really thought of myself as a collector. I think it's Thelma who said, "Yeah, you're a collector." But yeah, I'm an old dad. I'm in my 50s with young kids, so I think a lot about them growing up in a house full of art. They may not be artists, but I hope that they'll have an appreciation of art. I think there's some favorites already with the boys, and those works you'd want to keep forever and pass on to your family. I'm very much about this idea of legacy in the Black family, that we need to have more family heirlooms and things that we kind of, that we keep for ourselves. So I got to keep some of the art. And then a lot of it, I think, will go to the places that I love. I'm on the board at the AGO, the Art Gallery of Ontario. We have Julie Crooks, who many of you know, who's a PhD contemporary African photography, and she's now the head of this new global Africa and the diaspora department. I'm an advisor to that department. I think,
and I know you've got a big Caribbean show coming up. I know. I've been in touch I've been in touch with Julie because,
we've got this Montgomery collection of vintage Caribbean photographs. So there may be a place, with people who not only know how to take care of the art, but would be unafraid to display it, so there may be a place there where some of the work will go one day, but I'll defer to the others, but that's my thought.
Yeah. Anyone else? Suzie, have you thought about what you're going to do with your collections?
I didn't. I haven't until fairly recently, and it's again, it's about family. My son, and I involve him in my decisions. Like probably the past 3 years, when I think he's been mature enough to really make good decisions, so, and he will come in, and if a work's arrived, he'll just swipe it up and take it to his room, and that gives me a huge amount of joy.
How did he leave you the April Bay behind you? That's such a great piece.
It's too big. It's too feminine. It's Maya Angelou. He hasn't read her yet,
Okay.
But he's picked up a couple of contemporary African paintings that I've acquired recently. But I have begun to think about it really because of your question, Amanda. I don't think my collection is substantial enough or significant enough, but there's always a place, and I do think work should be seen. And I do think, I'm a great lover of the intuitives here, so I have quite a large collection of those, of that particular genre, and a great love for it. So I just think it's I will start thinking about it now properly. I've seen legacies dissolve and disintegrate, estates fall apart, and it's a real tragedy when really wonderful collections, just get kind of dismembered and scattered, and there's no real documentation. I think that's an issue in the whole region myself. So I don't want that to happen, certainly with me.
Yeah. Derek, what about you? Have you thought about, I mean, it's kind of a grim thought, but do you think about like, you know, again, where that might go? And because again, that does happen, the things dissipate and then someone's, you know, executor of the estate and one goes here and one goes there when you actually want them to live together or maybe go to a university or maybe go to.
Yes, no, you're precisely right, Amanda. Yeah, I have thought about it. I have no children. So, you know, it was a major thing for me to make sure that I knew what would happen to this collection that I had amassed over the years. And yeah, so I have committed it already. I have a program in place already to make sure that it gets to the right place.
That's awesome. What about you, Lusette? Is she with us? Or, yeah, she is.
Yes,
you gotta come. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. No, I have a problem because, especially because I run the gallery every day, and these last months, I mean, especially when COVID hit since last year, people coming to me that they want to sell their work and or sell the work of the parents or whatever. And these were some of these really, really good pieces and historical pieces that really belong somewhere. And I was, at that moment, I started thinking about my own collection. What am I going to do with it? You know, so it's very hard, especially because we don't have a contemporary museum here. And I don't know yet, but it's very, very important to think about those kind of stuff, especially when you see that everything is coming back for people and they want to sell. And that they go abroad. A lot of things, a lot of times, you know, Dutch people come and they buy the work, and then the work disappears, and it's a problem.
I mean, it is a problem. I mean, we're very lucky here in the Bahamas. We have several great institutions. I mean, we have the National Art Gallery, we have the Central Bank Collection, but also we have a private collection called the D. Aguilar Art Foundation. And that was, again, just somebody's collection. And luckily he had the foresight, Vincent D. Aguilar, to create a foundation for it. And it's a great educational space, you know, and they do a lot with the schools here, and it's, you know, again, it's a private foundation, but they do fantastic work. So, I mean, there's so many ways you can go. And I guess my next question for people that do, because I know, you know, many of you either advise corporations or maybe you advise banks. Derek, you're with you're with the central bank. Does your personal collecting differ from your institutional collecting? And do you put on different hats? Like, and how does that manifest? Or does it sort of match? Are you like, well, I'm buying this for the collection and I'm buying this for, you know, the bank or the AGO? Or do you have like very separate kind of strategies? I mean, I'm assuming you do, but I'd be interested to hear about how you swap those hats out. Derek, why don't you have a go?
Okay. Well, that's an excellent question, and you are very right. The strategies differ substantially. I mean, the central bank has a relatively formal, structured strategy now that we've developed about, you know, what to collect, how to collect it, you know, when to try to collect it. Now the curator and I are discussing, you know, expanding the different types of media. You know, we don't have a lot of photography in our collection, so you know, you're looking at that strategically. When it comes to my collection personally, it's very simple. I buy what I like. I buy what I like. I buy what I want. I don't care if I have wall space for it or not. If I have wall space, great. If I don't, well,
that means you're a true collector. That's what my husband always said. Like, you're only a real collector when you have more art than you have wall space.
Perhaps true.
And then I guess we also have to think about, I don't know, Kenneth, maybe for the AGO, you have to think, well, certainly at the bank, you have to think about politics and you know, like work that you can't show because it's maybe dealing with something that's too controversial or, you know, so I guess that would happen too. Kenneth, what about you? I mean, I guess it's the same for you. You just buy what you love, but do you find you have similar tracks or?
There is a difference, of course, right now with the Art Gallery of Ontario. I'm trying to initiate a program now. We've had some first meetings with Princess Margaret Hospital, a hospital in Toronto for cancer patients. And so the idea would be to, you know, provide kind of appropriate art for in reception area and for, you know, clinic rooms, for places where you're going to have your blood taken. And, you know, this is a really interesting thing for me to be kind of thinking about selecting works from, you know, a very large collection like the Art Gallery of Ontario for a very specific kind of purpose like this. It's a place of healing. It's a place often of grief. It's a place of, deep sort of thinking. And so, you really want to be putting appropriate works in there. On the other hand, it's an opportunity to kind of showcase works that speak to, the various communities in Toronto. So it's an incredible opportunity to, show works by Indigenous artists and artists of color and so forth. So you balance these things, and it's not an easy thing, but that's why we do what we do. You're supposed to kind of come with some knowledge about, and some sensitivity around work, so that you could make something like that actually, better than the hospital themselves just choosing art like McDonald's to go in there. You want to be specific.
Or like pretty art. I mean, Susanne, you did the hotel. I know you also advise corporations. Are you able to, do you just present them with things that you like? Or like, what's your strategy when you're working with a corporate client? And how does that differ from your own?
Yeah, I mean, it's a similar thing. You really have to consider the context in which you're working and what they want to achieve with what they want to do. I always advocate for, when I worked with the private client group at Bank of Nova Scotia on their program, we would do these mini retrospectives of the likes of Osmond Watson, Christopher Gonzalez, like really key artists. And people rarely get to see a sense of context, And we did an artist scholarship. So there's a combination that would be for an emerging artist. So I always consider the brief. I always try and support the emerging artists and the contemporary work. And but if it is that a master show is required, I mean, I really enjoy doing it. Again, a lot of it's about relationship, and that's with other collectors, and where the key pieces are and the important works. So it's case to case. I mean, my own personal collection, I buy what I love, I buy what moves me, and aesthetically what really appeals to me,
Yeah. Lusette, do you have any corporate clients? I know you collect personally. Do you do that as well?
Yes, sure. Yes, at this moment, I mean, we are working on a corporate project together with another colleague. But personally, I mean, I have a husband, and he is always like, where are you going to put that? And actually, I have more than I can display. But I still keep buying, and it's a problem. But it's really a problem.
Yeah, my husband and I have the same problem. We actually hide things, and then one will discover it, and we'll be like, "When did you get this?" I thought, and then it's okay because I actually bought this, and we start taking things out of the closet, and we're like, and we're both standing there like. And the good news is there's only been one work that I think we disagreed on. So thank the Lord, otherwise that would be a problem. Yes. But actually, what we don't do well, and I'm specifically going to ask this to Suzie and Lusette, but because I know, Ken, you have curators working with you, but how do you manage your own collection? Because we're not, you think I work at a gallery, I've worked at a museum, I know the importance of managing the collection, making sure you have up-to-date records, making sure you have records of where you bought it from, the provenance. We're just doing that with our private collection now, and maybe it's because we do it all day long that we don't want to do it when we get home. How do you manage your own collections, all of you? And are you documenting it properly? Have you hired a curator? Do you think you need to? Like, how are you approaching that? Because that's something important. Like, Suze, you spoke to knowing where the works are. If we don't document our collections, people don't know what we have, right? And it's just all in our head. So what are you doing, Lusette, for all the works you have? Do you have a curator? Do you document it yourself? How do you manage that?
I document it myself, actually, and what I feel very important is also that the artist know where his work is. That's one of the most important things. The only thing that I have a problem with, because I run a lot of shows, and with the shows I always know where the work is going and who bought it and everything, but the day-by-day sales, that's a problem. To document it. And my own collection, I mean, I know where I purchased it and when, but I mean, the proper documentation, I don't have.
But to somebody else, that's what I'm always thinking.
Yes,
I know,
that's true.
But
yes.
What happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? I need to write it all down, right? So,
yes, that's a problem. So you should be able to document everything. But I don't, and that's you have to take the time to do it.
Okay, I'll come to your house and do yours. You come to my house and do mine.
Oh, that's good. I mean, we will switch. I mean, I love that.
And what about you, Suze? Have you got like a proper?
No, I do it myself.
Yeah.
I've created a habit and a kind of practice of when I do get a new work, I create, because you do wonder, like, you know, if you keel over tomorrow, you know, who's going to know what? So
right, what's where and where you got it
from.
I
try and keep up. And then when I have time, like in the beginning of COVID, I had a lot of time at home. So I started to kind of document the works I have in storage or works that I don't have up because I too overflow. I also created, you know, much more functional and better storage capacity. But in terms of documentation, provenance is a huge issue, as we know. And I've made, I would say in the past 5 years, probably since my second auction, I've really started to keep a post-event document of who purchased what that could be shared, you know, whenever it's required. But I also provide provenance to people that buy from me.
Yeah, which is so important, right? Because knowing where something came from. And so Ken, I mean, you have curators. When did you make that decision? When for you did you realize like, okay, I need help here? Like otherwise.
It's actually the person who's now my wife, Sarah.
Oh.
Yeah, so back in 2007, she was a grad student, I think, at York University, and came to an art show that was a survey show of work for my collection, and gave me your card, and, you know, I'll volunteer with you. And then I think I went off to something, and it was probably 3 or 4 months later that I called her. And, you know, over a 2-year period, she was coming once a week to my place, and, you know, then she had the key, and, you know, we started to have dinners. But really, she's the one that kind of said, my God, like, look at this, you've got to start organizing this and put it in, I think, a program at the time.
That sounds like that sounds like a woman. Yes.
Oh,
like,
yeah. She was like,
we need order here.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm buying the next work. She's the one that's like, you know, so the journey is like, I buy the work. She's the one that sort of files everything. And so I think we use FileMaker Pro or some older program, and it just keeps going through different iterations. Maria Candelopoulos has worked with some kind of a, you know, exhibition coordinator, gallerist, and documenting person for the Wedge Collection for maybe 10 years now. And Sarah doesn't do that anymore. And so now it's a matter of kind of moving to the latest and best practice. So we're getting closer to kind of what a museum might use with, you know, a digital platform. If you Google the Wedge Collection or go to wedgecollection.org, you'll see kind of how it's organized online. But of course, you need a program that's very robust now, and you can more like you would do with a gallery, you know, an image, like, all the descriptions and all the, you know.
Yeah, that's what we have. I mean, we
cross-reference
have Primer.
Yeah,
we have Primer, but it's based on FileMaker Pro. But again, it's and I think at the NAGB we just moved to catalog it. So it's, you know, it's important again, like for institutions. But I think that's why I brought it up. It's also important for individuals because we know that institutions have to have it to be able to find something where it got loaned. You know, the text about it. But I think, you know, sometimes in your own personal practice. And so for anyone listening out there, if you're going to begin a collection, you know, start right away, because otherwise it does become this thing if you're like, oh my gosh, now I've got 500 pieces and what I have to start from the beginning. What about you, Derek? Do you have any kind of catalog of your collection? Do you have somebody come in and make sure it's all documented, or?
No, I did it myself. I'm pretty pedantic about those types of things. So I kept the records. I'm not using dedicated software for it, but I'm just making sure that as I acquire work, I take a photograph of it. You know, it might be not a fantastically high resolution photograph, but something to document along with the artist and the date of purchase, etc. So I have kept up with it. I would probably say maybe the 1 or 2 pieces that I purchased recently that I don't have in the file yet, but yeah, I just do it myself.
Well, I would expect that from, I definitely would expect that from a banker, to be so precise. So that's good to know. So there's actually a question coming in from Nugent Smith, who's an artist in New Jersey, but with Caribbean roots. And he's actually got work in the Atlantic Art Fair. So I should just plug the fair again. We're all here because of the Atlantic Art Fair, which, as Kenneth spoke to, is a great place to find art while it's still hopefully affordable and before they all become world superstars. Some of the work that Derek showed, you know, is on there. Melissa Alcina, who was the photographer we saw at the beginning, that we didn't get a chance to talk about, and Heino Schmidt and Tessa Whitehead, they all have work. And Nugent Smith has work with I believe Suzie Wong Presents, right? So his question is, how do collectors in the region, as with other tropical climates, manage the preservation of works such as works on paper that can be compromised by the climate, humidity, etc.? Great question. I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. I'll answer on behalf of the NAGB, which I used to work at, which was the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, that it is, we don't have trained conservation people here. And that is something that we have worked with the University of the Bahamas to hopefully change. When I say we, I mean at the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas. And we're thinking about starting a capital campaign to actually create a building where we can train, because so many people are coming out of UB with the technical capacity to become conservators, but we don't have a school here that does it. So we've been working, bringing people down, slowly training one of the staff members at the NAGB in conservation practices. But it's also educating the collectors themselves. It's a great question, Nujan, because a lot of collectors don't know what they have to look out for, or that they shouldn't hang it in the sun. I've been to people's homes to borrow works, and I'm like, oh my God, you have that? Like, you see it hanging like in the kitchen with the sun coming right on it, and they just didn't know. So education's important. What about you guys? I know in Jamaica they have on staff a conservation person at the museum, which you're a board member of, Suze.
Yeah, we have a conservator, Joelle, who's brilliant. She was trained abroad and came home. We have, there's another trained conservator locally, and collectors would bring in, like I know Wallace Campbell, like maybe once every 2 years, he would bring in a conservator, especially around paper, to be honest, because we didn't have anyone that could do that here, in from Cuba, where they have training and that kind of thing. And then they'd either be advised by galleries, either like art lovers who have works that are compromised, could go and have this conservator handle them and do the work needed. And I think there's a lot that framing places do. I know Olympia, I know ourselves, and Frame Center, and I think most of the galleries, there's a way that you mount these work, and it's all acid-free material. You have barrier paper, you have papers in there that can absorb the moisture that need to be changed maybe every 5-8 years. Look out for spotting, foxing, and those were ongoing kind of conversations in the gallery with works, and especially around antiques, antique prints, antique maps, and in certain areas like in the hills, it can be a nightmare. Like people in Mandeville, they tell them, no, don't buy works on paper, because it's expensive as well to restore paper, more so than other media.
I mean, the important thing is to keep things at an even temperature. It doesn't really matter if it's really cold or but it's always even. I think the fluctuation of temperature can be really problematic. And of course, the humidity. At Central Bank,
the humidity,
I mean, you probably have very good climate control and good storage. So,
yeah, and also for my personal collection, I keep it climate controlled all the time.
Mm-hmm. And we do now have a framer, because we didn't. I mean, it's great that you talk about it, Suze, that you have so many places. We really only just recently, our framers started actually understanding about acid-free paper and archival materials, because, they were just using the cardboard in the back until 1990 probably, or, regular Scotch tape. So I think also, that was something we did at NAGB too, was just kind of try to educate on all those other things, like that art isn't just like buying the pretty thing, but how do you care for it? How do you really care for it over time? Lusette, is there anybody in Curacao that specializes in?
No, actually the National Archive here, and they have one conservation person that does paper, but I mean, it's a lot, they have a lot of work there. So paper is really, really a problem. The humidity in Curacao is very high, and we do have a frame shop, because we try to always use exit-free stuff. But it's I always advise people, if they are going to put work that has a lot of sunlight, to use special glass for the work.
Glass.
Museum glass for the work. But I mean, it's very expensive too.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true, but it's more expensive to have to restore your work after it's been damaged.
That's true.
So I think it's a bit like healthcare, right? It's like eat healthfully, and maybe that's more expensive than going to KFC, but in the long run, you're going to save money because you're taking care of your body.
Yeah, especially photographs. It's also very important to conserve them.
Yeah, and that's why, we're talking to some photographers about not printing on paper anymore, but doing like alu dye bond or something like that might actually like survive better in this climate. So those are really things that we have to consider. Anyway, we've come to the end of our hour and a half. So I just want to thank everybody so much. It was really wonderful to see your collections. It was wonderful to hear from people from all over the region and internationally. So we have, again, Kenneth up in Toronto, Lusette from Gallery Alma Blou from Curacao, Susanne Fredricks of Suzie Wong Presents from Jamaica, Derek Rolle from the Central Bank of the Bahamas, from obviously the Bahamas. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in. I want to thank you all for being here today. And of course, I want to thank Artsy for giving us this platform. And I encourage everybody to go see the Atlantic World Art Fair on Artsy and to see the 9 galleries and curatorial projects that are there presenting. And, you know, even if you're not interested in buying, you know, just go to look and see what is happening in the region. And of course, thank you to Butterfield, who's the main sponsor that allowed all of our galleries to join without having to front too much cash. So it's been a real pleasure. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to the audience for being here. And yeah, hopefully see you all in person soon when we can all fly again.
Thank you, Amanda. Really wonderful.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.